I just got done playing Bloodborne 3 times in a row, and even after getting all the achievements, I cannot stop thinking about it. I wanted to incorporate it into my Overwatch videos somehow, so it's time I finally start my new series I will be calling Skinwatch. Basically, it's just me taking a hypothetical skin line and giving as many characters as I reasonably can a skin. Bloodborne has lots of unique characters and a healthy variety of them, so that should make it a good fit for this series. There are a couple ground rules for this episode. Beware of spoilers for Bloodborne, obviously. I will cover all major main game and DLC bosses, as well as certain NPCs. I will not be covering anything in Chalice dungeons as I find them way less interesting and they reuse many of the main game's bosses and enemies anyway. I will try to focus a lot on visual and gameplay design, and will have to mainly ignore lore because Bloodborne has a lot of misshapen, melee-focused enemies, and Overwatch's roster is mainly humanoid. For some of them, we'll have to take what we can get. Since I'm doing every single boss, we're gonna have to use our imagination a little bit, as some of them are definitely a stretch. And finally, some heroes could work for multiple characters, but I decided to do one hero per boss as it makes it a little more fun and challenging. Also, since Bloodborne is only on PlayStation and not on PC, I wasn't able to capture anything of it, so I'm going to be using footage from Boss Fight Database, so thank you so much for them. That's where most of the footage from this video comes from. With that being said, I think the best place to start is the Hunter, the character that you play as during the game. I understand that they are customizable, but the Hunter gear is iconic enough for a skin in my opinion. Taking into consideration the multiple melee weapons, offhanded gun, and potential to gain health by attacking, Junker Queen I think fits perfectly into this skin. Of course, Junker Queen has a much bigger personality than the Hunter since they don't really have one at all, but every character in Overwatch has a big personality, so I don't think it really is a factor. Sticking with the non-bosses, one of the other most iconic characters in Bloodborne is the Doll. Since she is a pacifist and helps the Hunter get stronger on their journey, I felt like this was a perfect fit for Mercy. If you're familiar who the Doll actually is based on in Bloodborne, this might not make as much sense, but I decided just to pick two different characters for them for variety's sake. From here on out, I will be following an order loosely based on when you would encounter each boss, so we will start with the Cleric Beast. The Beast enemies are typically hard to pin down, but since this one is humanoid, it does make it a little easier to pick. I think the most important visual design to keep in mind here is the one larger arm, and that makes me think of Doomfist. They are both melee focused as well, so I think it's a pretty good fit. Moving on to the first major boss of the game, Father Gascoin is an interesting case. There aren't many characters that have melee weapons, guns, and use their fists in Overwatch, so many of the transforming bosses are hard to pin down. For this one, I decided to go with Ramatra. His Omnic mode could be him in phase 2 of the fight where he uses his extended axe, while his Nemesis mode could have him transform into the Beast version. His first phase with the gun would have to be kind of ignored, but I think this is a fine trade-off to have a real transforming boss. Up next is the Blood-Starved Beast, and this one is definitely one of the stretches. I ended up going with Moira simply for the fact that she does have a holdable weapon, kinda hunches over a little, and her purple stuff could be kinda like the poison BSB has. She's also decently mobile like BSB, but if Overwatch did this skin line, I don't think the Blood-Starved Beast would make the cut, so it doesn't really matter. Vicar Amelia was one that I struggled with, as her transformation limits the pool of heroes and her melee-focused moveset limits it even further. I eventually settled on D.Va with her mech being beast mode and her baby form being her pre-transformation. I'm not very happy with this one to be honest with you, but the transformation is too essential to her fight that I had to kind of make a compromise here. Speaking of compromises, the Witches of Hemwick I think are the bottom of the barrel in terms of who I came up with to put here. They summon some things in the arena, TP around, and stun you sometimes. With those things in mind, I chose Symmetra because of the teleportation and the summoning, and Sombra due to her teleportation and her stun. Listen, I hate this boss and I would never actually give them a skin, but since I'm doing everything, some stinkers are gonna find their way in. I'm sorry. Moving on to an actually okay choice, I'm giving Dark Beast Parl to Winston. He is a non-humanoid creature with lightning attacks, and that is exactly what Winston is. I wish I could have given Winston a skin of a more iconic character, but I think he's just too much of a good fit here to ignore. The Shadows of Yharnam are next, and I decided to give these to Genji, Hanzo, and Kiriko. Genji can be the melee one, Hanzo the ranged one, and Kiri the all-rounder. Also, Hanzo and Genji's dragons could be replaced with the snakes, since the Shadows summon them in the third phase. Plus, I think putting all these characters into cloaks would just make them look cool. Next is Rom, and while I initially struggled to find anything close to her body shape and size, I realized that she's just a spider and could just be a widow skin. Just put on a weird eye mask and then call it an epic skin, and I think that'd just be super easy. The one reborn has the most unique shape of any of the bosses in the game, but I decided to go with Bastion for a couple of reasons. Even though the boss never actually transforms, one side is upright and one side isn't, and could work really well as Bastion's different forms. Also, the mass amalgamation of limbs would look really cool on an Omnic. The Run Reborn also has both an explosion and a rain of bodies, which would work really well for the grenade and the ultimate. And plus, Ganymede could be a little witch that's chilling in the boss arena. I think it'd be really funny. Definitely one of the more creative choices, but I think would be one of the cooler ones too. I initially had another character for Martyr Ligarius, but had to put him somewhere else, so I settled on Reaper for this one. They are both skeletons and both have a mode that makes them harder to hit, and that's kind of the best I've got in terms of similarities. I also just think Reaper would look cool with the crown and the scythe on his back, and that's kind of what I'm just going off of for this one. Amygdala is weird, skinny, and otherworldly, and if we know anything about Zenyatta skins, that's his bread and butter. This boss also has some ranged arcane attacks, which works well for Zen, and the multiple arms are reminiscent of some of his emotes. The Celestial Emissary is another boss where I had someone else here, but had to swap them over, and since I didn't have a great alternative, why not go with Space Ranger? She's from space and seems to have a helmet on that could be shaped like this guy's head. I know we don't know much about Space Ranger, but since they're not a very important boss, I think this is fine for now. Abriatus, Daughter of the Cosmos, I really hope I'm saying that right, is a very weird shape, but luckily Orisa fits the lopsided nature pretty well. Now, this boss is the most overtly Yonic design in the whole game, and would never actually make it into Overwatch, but I think the skin team could definitely cook with this and make it probably the scariest skin in the game. Okay, I hate Mikolash so much, and I wanted to give him one of my least favorite heroes in the game initially, but unfortunately, Sigma is just too perfect of a pick. He's a scholar who has gone mad and lives in his own little world, and also has magic of the cosmos. Like, come on. Plus, that head cage would go crazy on a Sigma skin. For Mergo's Wet Nurse, I actually have Moira again. Ah, shit, I used Moira twice, didn't I? Okay, since no one cares about BSB, let's just say that this is the Moira skin. The Wet Nurse teleports around in a cloudy mist like Moira, and is more than likely a distorted version of an actual nurse in terms of like the lore and stuff. And while Moira is a full-blown scientist, I think the bio-experiments of Moira still kind of fit the theme. Gurman is the regular final boss of the game and is the old man in the wheelchair who's with you the entire experience. He is also the founding member of the Old Hunters, and I think for that reason, I'm gonna have to go with 76. I know I focused mostly on gameplay for this list, but since there are a limited number of melee characters, I think it's fine to make a compromise here, especially for a very important character. Plus, Soldier is also very old as well, so it kinda works. The secret final boss of Bloodborne is the Moon Presence, with a very weird alien-like design. Since it is vaguely humanoid, has some flowing pieces, and was seen floating, I think Echo could work pretty well for this. For the record, I am just ignoring Duplicate because I don't think it works for any boss in the game. Echo just typically gets some great skins, and I think this one would look sick. Finally, moving on to the DLC, Ludwig gave me a lot of trouble since he is another two-stage transforming boss. I decided just to go with Reinhardt here and focus on the second phase with the sword. The Fire Strikes could be the Sword Blast, and Earthshatter kinda looks like some of the AoE moves he does. Plus, he'll look a little bit more like Beast Mode when he's charging as well. Next is Lawrence, who is basically a reskin of the Cleric Beast with fire and lava. Keeping on theme with the Cleric Beast's lopsided top half, I think Torb fits this decently well. Plus, Lawrence loses his legs halfway through the fight and is closer to the size of Torb anyways. Lady Maria is the character that the doll is based off of, but unlike her, she can actually go to town and is a skilled fighter. I have Ashe here just because their base designs look kind of similar, but honestly I think it should just be Mercy as well. Plus, both characters have awesome outfits and I'm sure they would sell extremely well. And for the final boss of the game, we have the Orphan of Kos. Orphan is always screaming and jumping and throwing all these little placenta bombs around the arena. I know this is really dumb, but I'm gonna go with Junkrat. I mean, how funny would a placenta cannon be? Like, come on. Junkrat's already nasty and skinny and gross, and he would be perfect for Orphan. Oh, and don't think I forgot about the Living Failures. Any hero that didn't get a skin can get one of these. They're very basic and humanoid, and the boss is a collection of many of these, so I think it's a nice little catch-all. And that's it. That's every boss in Bloodborne. Now, Bloodborne is probably not a game thematically that would work very well for a T-rated hero shooter, but this is all for fun anyways, so I don't think it matters too much. Plus, not every design is not so subtly based around genitalia, so I'm pretty sure some of these would be possible if they wanted to go for it anyway. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a 4th playthrough to start. Thank you all for watching. And if you want to see more, please feel free to subscribe or do any of that good YouTube stuff. This is actually the start of a series, and I have some ideas for the next ones coming later, so stay tuned for those. Also, if you want to join in on some of these discussions and brainstorming sessions live, that's going to be twitch.tv/LaneHemingway. I also have a Discord channel where you can send me Overwatch hot takes and hero rework ideas, and I may take a look at them on stream and maybe make a video out of them. And as always, thank you again for watching, and have a good day.